Hello, today I have the honor of speaking with Dr. Rubana Haq. Dr. Haq is currently the Vice Chancellor of the Asian University of Women. She brings with her a unique perspective with her eclectic background from being a regular columnist at the Daily Star to her time as the president of the Bangladesh Garments Manufacturers and Export Association. But more importantly, she's a judge for this year's essay contest. So Dr. Haq, as a judge for this year's essay contest, what elements will you look for in your evaluation of the essays? In other words, what makes a great academic essay?
Well, I think I really cannot comment on a great academic essay, but I can easily say what a good essay may look like. A good essay must be backed with a lot of data, with a lot of research, with a lot of evidence, and most of all, it must be backed by conviction. Unless the writers are into the topic, just skimming the surface won't do. So it's important for them to go into every detail and not really bank on word count, not really count on the format that it's following, but what's more important is how much they think they know about the subject and how much they're willing to invest in. I think this essay should set the initial tone of future research. So it must have the potential of research element in future. If somebody is even referring to a case study, let it span into a full-on research at a later point. So it cannot be a writing in isolation. It has to be a writing with potential. So it has to have potential, it has to have faith, it has to have conviction, it must have data and evidence. And that's mostly what anyone would look for in a good essay.
Those are some great advice. So my second question is, how might a writer structure their essay to build a more coherent argument? So just to paraphrase that, how can they take the research that they have done in the books or whatever sources and bring that to their writing and use it to support their own thoughts?
It's actually pretty simple. If one wants to know about the subject in detail, then one invests in reading up enough on the topic. Because if you read enough, or at least try and read enough, then you form your own trail of thought. And when that happens, automatically, you don't have to really refer back to the book, except for academic reference purpose. But when you put your thoughts into the essay, you will find yourself discovering your own trail of thought, and you will accordingly sort of frame your thoughts, and you will paint the landscape according to what you're thinking. So it's not very difficult to structure an essay, especially when you have enough reading up done. And also when you link your thoughts to all that you have read, you will find an easy chain in all of that. So I think it's just painting your thoughts and putting them in the landscape of your essay framework, and that should do it. There's no hard and fast rule, really.
That's great. So I want to ask a little bit about research now. So the last year winner of the contest, she actually interviewed by email Wei Lan. So that was very exciting for some of the judges last year, because there's this idea that research should be only in books or in articles. And as a judge, would you encourage them to look at a variety of sources, such as documentary or interviews? And you have done your PhD very recently with primary sources, with the writer's workshop. So do you have any tips on how one can go about interviewing someone or collecting primary sources?
Well, there's no shortcut to it. I can only tell you this. If you really want to do primary research, if you really want to investigate, there's no way you'll be able to find a shortcut to any of this. If you want your essay to be rich in content, then to your defense, you must pack it enough with data, enough data. So what you do basically is you spend, like I did, I spent hours. I actually spent days and weeks in the archive researching 3,200 titles. And literally I scanned 700 books and brought it back with me to Bangladesh. So from India to Bangladesh, I literally transferred digitally an archive of 700 books. So, you have to get ready for the physical challenges. You have to make sure there's no shortcut to the time spent in research. Only then can a research paper can be rich in content. So it just isn't about reading articles, and it just isn't about putting a few references together and writing a good paper. If you want to back it, you have to be speaking to a lot of people, interviewing a lot of people, and then, diarizing chronologically of who you have spoken to, what you've spoken to, and then put all of this into perspective. So basically, interviews, spending a lot of time in archives, physically investing in a lot of investigation is the only way to have a rich content in your essay.
That sounds really great. So there's another question that I'm very interested in, especially with your background. I think there's this myth that I really hate, that fiction or poetry writing are creative while academic writing is not creative. So my question to you is, as a poet and also somebody who wrote hundreds of pieces on academic writing, how do you make your academic writing more creative? Is there any techniques that you use in poetry to make your academic writing a little bit more enriched and more, pleasure to read?
So let me start with what I did. What I did was, when I was doing my research, I made sure that I first went with the flow, and it was very spontaneous. And I was a mature student, so my thoughts were all over the map. And my supervisor made me rewrite my thesis 12 times. So you can well imagine that it wasn't easy. I literally rewrote my thesis 12 times in 6 years. So eventually, last 18 months are the most crucial. So how did I make it interesting? I think it was interesting when I didn't edit so much. It became an academic piece of writing. And then, because it was primary research and there weren't theories to refer to, it was easy for me. Very often experiences lead to theories, and theories don't lead to experiences or life. So if you follow that, then you know what you're getting into. And today, when I'm going to be publishing my thesis, I'm rewriting it completely differently, because now it's going to be a story and just not a thesis. So academic writings can be interesting, but they may not sound like fiction because it's backed by a lot of data and evidence. So don't lose heart if your academic piece of writing does not look very interesting to many others. But as long as you find interest in it, you will find juice enough to create your next writing based on this, which can be more fun. So creative writing is something that does not exclude academic writing. It's just that you need to rechannel your thoughts and reprocess your techniques and apply it to whether it's a research paper or whether it's a newspaper article or whether it's an academic piece of writing in a journal. They all have their own persona. You just have to be flexible and you have to adapt to the needs of the genre.
Sounds great. And for my final question, I think you probably still remember this, trying to fit in everything with the word count for a lot of your articles that you wrote all over the world. So for this year's contest and all the contests, we limit the word count to 500 words. It's a good exercise for when students get into college to say stuff concisely and clearly. So do you have any advice on how they could stay within that word limit and make sure that they say their main ideas? And if there's any tips that you have, like, writing a lot and cutting it down or making an outline, is there anything to fit all their thoughts in that word count?
I think it's best to outline your thoughts and then form your piece, because many of the abstract of the thesis are not more than 200 to 300 words. So when a researcher tries to contain his or her thoughts, her whole 300-page thought into only 300 words, it's a lot of struggle because you have to say a lot. So how do you say a lot in 500? Well, it's pretty easy, actually. Your intro and your conclusion have to be very, very definite. So your definitive approach in intro and conclusion would help you. But in the middle, you pack in your arguments logically, chronologically, and also systematically. You should not be indulging in creative impulses.